Chosen one, the fact that you're seeing this right now means something in you has already awakened. This isn't random. It's a signal that has been circling your name for longer than you realize. You have felt it in moments when your silence burned louder than your words, when the atmosphere shifted simply because you were present. They never feared what you said. They feared the fire you carried even when you said nothing. Something unseen has aligned to bring you here, because tonight you are about to remember what silence has always meant for the chosen. This moment was written into your path long before you knew to expect it. The signs you've been noticing were not accidents. They were invitations to step into the version of yourself they never wanted you to become. You may have dismissed them as passing feelings, but your soul always knew this hour would come. The theme of this message is simple yet fierce. Your silence is not emptiness, it is fire. And when that fire begins to move, no enemy, no system, no false structure can withstand it. What if I told you they always mocked your silence because they sensed its danger? What if I told you that the quietest moments of your life were the most threatening to those who tried to control you? They never wanted you to know that your silence was not weakness, but a weapon. Something huge is happening right now. Your silence is about to become the very fire that changes everything. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Stay with me until the end, because what begins here is not just revelation, it is transformation. Number one, the spark they mocked. They thought your silence meant defeat. They assumed that when you withdrew, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped arguing back, you were broken. But they misunderstood you. Silence has always been the spark hidden in dry wood, small and overlooked until the wind of God breathes upon it. Exodus 14 verse 14 reminds us, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Your stillness was never absence. It was alignment with a power that does not need noise to be known. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you've ever been mocked for your silence, only to realize it was your strength. And stay ready, because what begins as a spark does not stay hidden. It waits for the right moment to ignite. There is a memory that lingers, soft yet undeniable, of moments when you felt something stirring beneath the surface of your life. Perhaps it came as a dream where you stood in silence while flames surrounded you, and yet not one spark touched your skin. Perhaps it was a voice within that whispered, "Be still, for stillness is strength," even when the world pressed you to speak. These glimpses were not imagination, but prophecy disguised as ordinary experience. They arrived to confirm what your spirit had always suspected, that there was a depth to you others could not name. This depth was not built in noise, but in silence, a silence they could not understand. What you are recognizing now is that these moments were never accidents, they were beginnings of revelation. You have carried seasons of confusion, moments where you felt invisible, and times when your quiet nature seemed to set you apart. In gatherings where others laughed freely, you felt the ache of not belonging, even though no one dared say it aloud. In conversations, you often chose silence over conflict, not because you had nothing to offer, but because something in you knew your words carried too much weight. You were told you were too sensitive, too withdrawn, or not assertive enough. Yet in your solitude, you felt currents that no one else seemed to notice. That sensitivity, once seen as burden, was in truth a gateway to knowing. What they mistook as weakness was the very mark that set you apart as chosen. What if all those experiences were never random, but carefully aligned by an unseen hand? What if the silence they mocked was the soil where your greatest strength was planted? Scripture gives us glimpses of this hidden architecture. When Elijah fled to the mountain, he expected God to speak in fire or earthquake, but instead he found him in a gentle whisper. Your silence has always been that whisper, the place where heaven hides its fire until the time is right. Your story has never been about absence, but about timing, alignment, and preparation. The setbacks you endured, the rejection you faced, even the long seasons of solitude, were pieces of a sacred design. The silence you carried was not an empty pause. but the architecture of destiny waiting to unfold. Think of the subtle signs that marked your path, signs you dismissed, yet could never truly forget. A wave of déjà vu that left you unsettled. A dream where you saw yourself standing in places you had never been, and yet felt strangely familiar. A chill across your skin when someone spoke lies near you, as if your very body resisted falsehood. A sudden quiet in your mind when you chose not to answer back, followed by an inner peace that words could not give. These were not meaningless occurrences. They were the subtle signals of a deeper awakening, a reminder that silence is not emptiness, but the birthplace of divine recognition. Each sign was a gentle nudge, pointing you toward the truth that your silence carries flame. For years, you doubted yourself, wondering if your instincts were wrong or if you were simply imagining connections. Yet here is the truth. You did not imagine it, you perceived it. The unease you felt in certain rooms was not paranoia, but discernment. The way your spirit recoiled at false smiles was not insecurity, but foresight. What felt like conflict within you was, in reality, confirmation. You have always been aligned more deeply than you knew. Your silence has been your sanctuary, the place where heaven confirmed what others denied. And slowly, that alignment has grown into a shield, protecting you even when you did not realize you were being guarded. This remembrance deepens with every passing moment, revealing that you are not becoming someone new, but recovering who you always were. Beneath the labels, beneath the false roles they tried to place upon you, lies the archetypal truth of your being. Like Moses hidden in a basket, like David tending sheep in obscurity, your destiny was preserved in silence until the appointed time. Silence was never the absence of voice, but the concealment of calling. What you are recalling now is not invention, it is restoration. You were not overlooked. You were hidden, preserved, and set apart. The silence they mocked was the very seal of heaven over your life. Now, the fire begins to flicker. It does not arrive with chaos, but with a steady strength that cannot be denied. Your sensitivity is no longer a wound, but a weapon. Your inner knowing is no longer dismissed, but embraced as guidance. The hunger you have felt for truth, for meaning, for alignment, is not a curse, but a compass. You were never meant to live in the shallow waters of noise. You were called to carry the depth of flame. The silence within you begins to transform into presence, and your presence begins to shift the ground around you. What once was mocked is now revealed as power. Chosen one, the fact that you are hearing this confirms what you have long suspected. Your silence has always been fire waiting for breath. The path that felt fragmented now reveals itself as a pattern, an orchestration, a preparation too perfect to be chance. You have not come to this moment by accident. You have been guided, carried, and aligned into it. Comment, I carry the silence as crown. If you feel this remembrance rising in you as a mark that you receive the truth of who you are. And know this, the spark they mocked is only the beginning, for the next unveiling will reveal how silence itself becomes the sword that cuts through their illusions. What we do here every day is possible because of the few who choose to be keepers of this light. I thank them now, one by one, in the silence of my heart. If you want to be part of the circle and receive what cannot be spoken in public, join. The portal is below. Number 2, silence as the sword. When the silence ignites, it is not retreat, it is revelation. Silence strips illusions and leaves people with nothing but the truth of who they are. They cannot distract themselves with noise when you stop feeding it. Your silence forces them to face the mirror, and mirrors terrify those who have lived in lies. Amos 5 verse 24 says, "Let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream." And often that justice begins not with words, but with presence. You didn't need to shout. You only needed to stop explaining because the fire within you spoke louder than their accusations. Comment, I walk crowned by eternal flame. If you have ever felt the moment when silence revealed more than words. And know this, the sword of silence does not wound you. It cuts away the false coverings they try to place upon you. There are moments when a heaviness enters the room before words are spoken, a quiet pressure that lingers like a shadow behind every glance. You may have felt it sitting among people who smiled but did not welcome you, their laughter carrying an edge you could not name. It was not hatred in the open, but something quieter and harder to trace, like a current flowing beneath still waters. You began to notice that your presence alone seemed to change the air, as though an invisible resistance gathered itself against you. Even before you understood who you were, something seemed to mark you as different, and that difference carried weight. The silence you carried made others restless, because it revealed what their words could not hide. What you felt was not your imagination. It was the first signal that your spark unsettled their illusions. The weight of such resistance pressed against your emotions in ways that cut deep, leaving you questioning your worth. You felt the sting of rejection not once, but in patterns, as though being misunderstood had been written into your very story. Shame was handed to you like a cloak, urging you to believe you were too much, too strange, or too broken. There were days when silence felt like exile, not choice, as if your withdrawal proved their whispers right. Yet within the ache of isolation was a strange pull, a sense that even your loneliness carried meaning. Every moment of doubt carved its way into you, yet none of those scars were wasted. The pain you carried was not a sign of weakness, but evidence that you were seen as a threat long before you saw yourself as chosen. What if the forces that opposed you were not random, but intentional? What if the coldness, the betrayal, and the silence you endured came because your light disturbed their order? Like Israel wandering in the wilderness, you were pressed into barren places, not because you were abandoned, but because you were being prepared. Resistance is the training ground of the chosen, and what feels like sabotage often carries the fingerprints of divine protection. Your setbacks stripped away the false supports you leaned on, teaching you how to walk with strength only heaven could give. Those who dismissed you were unknowingly serving your refinement, burning away everything that could not withstand the fire. The trial was not chaos. It was architecture, a sacred alignment hiding beneath the pain. And you have lived in that structure even without realizing it. Look back carefully, and the patterns begin to reveal themselves. Notice how betrayal came not once, but in cycles, wearing different faces, yet carrying the same wound. Notice how environments drained you, as though rooms that welcomed others rejected your presence without explanation. Obstacles appeared at moments when you were closest to breakthrough. Delays stacked themselves just when clarity began to form. At first, it looked like bad luck, but over time it began to feel deliberate, like a script being played out in the background. These were not accidents, but confirmations that your life was set apart, too significant to pass unnoticed. Each repetition was a hidden message urging you to see beyond the surface. The patterns were whispers pointing toward a truth you were not yet ready to name. When the veil begins to lift, the resistance takes on form, and what was once invisible becomes impossible to ignore. You sense it in heavy air, in rooms that thicken with tension when you arrive. You feel it in foggy moments when clarity slips from your grasp, as though unseen hands try to dull your vision. Doors close that should have opened, and opportunities vanish without reason, leaving you staring at emptiness. Silent watchers seem to linger at the edges of your journey, not in bodies but in energies that feed on distraction and despair. These are not ghosts to be feared, but reminders that your light attracts interference. Resistance rises not because you are empty, but because you are full. And the more your silence sharpened into presence, the more visible the opposition became. Your reaction to such pressure was not always strength, and that too holds truth. There were times when you shut down, shrinking your voice so the room would not notice your fire. At other times, you bent yourself to please, trading your truth for temporary peace. Quiet rebellion flickered in you as well, a defiance too small to change the moment, but strong enough to keep your spirit alive. You felt the fear of being too different, the ache of standing out when you longed to blend in. Doubt whispered that perhaps they were right, that perhaps you should give up, soften, or disappear. Yet, even in these responses, something within you refused to die. The fact that you are here now proves that every reaction, even the quiet ones, preserved the spark they thought they had smothered. Now the shift begins, chosen one, and what once crushed you now confirms you. Resistance was never condemnation. It was a signpost declaring you were marked. The weight pressed against you because you carried a fire they could not afford to see ignite. Your silence, mocked and misread, is revealed as your sword, sharper than words, more dangerous than arguments. It is not absence, but revelation, cutting through illusions and forcing truth to the surface. What they feared most was never your voice, but the moment you stopped explaining yourself. And that moment has arrived, returning to you the power they tried to strip away. Here is the revelation that seals this truth. You were opposed because you are powerful. The clarity of your silence burned through their disguises, leaving them scrambling to hide from what you revealed. Every attempt to suppress you became proof of your purpose, every closed door a witness to your calling. The fact that you are still standing is evidence that nothing they used could overcome what was written in you. Comment, "I move guarded by divine fire," if you recognize this truth rising in you now, as the mark that you were never defeated, only sharpened. For silence was never your end. It was the blade you were meant to wield, and the fire that waits in silence has only begun to show its strength, preparing to burn brighter in the revelations yet to come. Every word, every image you receive here is an offering. If you feel this word has touched you today, you can honor it with a sign right here below with a donation through the Super Thanks button. It is a small gesture, but it opens great doors. Number 3, the presence that shifts rooms. There is something they cannot explain, why your presence alone changes the atmosphere. Before you open your mouth, the fire moves. Before you speak, the room adjusts. Luke 21 verse 15 declares, "For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict." But sometimes you don't even need the words, because your very being speaks the language of truth. People sense it. Some are drawn, some are repelled, but none remain neutral. They never feared your opinions. They feared what your silence carried into the room. Comment, "I rise marked by the divine." If you've ever felt the tension in the air shift the moment you entered, and share your story of how others reacted without you saying a single word. Because what you carry cannot be contained, and their reactions expose more about them than about you. A sudden clarity arrives like lightning behind closed eyes, illuminating everything you thought was random with a strange new order. Moments that once haunted you in silence suddenly fall into place like pieces of a puzzle that were waiting for the right light. A memory you dismissed as unimportant now rises like prophecy, whispering of a time when you were already marked. The laughter of those who mocked you no longer sounds like power, but like fear wearing a mask. You realize that what you carried all along was not confusion, but a sight they could not name. The veil is thinner now, and the outlines of hidden patterns begin to reveal themselves in the quiet corners of your mind. What once felt like chaos now begins to sing with design. The world itself starts speaking in codes, as though the fabric of reality was always whispering to you through numbers, visions, and echoes in silence. You notice repeating patterns, small alignments that seem too precise to dismiss, and words arriving at the exact moment your heart aches for them. Dreams that once felt like fragments now carry the weight of scrolls being unsealed in the night. The geometry of your life shifts, invisible lines connecting events that once felt disconnected. A divine math plays across your days, orchestrated not by chance, but by a rhythm deeper than logic. It is as though reality itself has been rewritten in symbols, and your spirit suddenly knows how to read. And as your eyes open to it, you realize that it was always there, waiting for your recognition. Inside, the changes grow sharper, undeniable, impossible to silence. Your intuition pierces through the fog, calling out lies before they can take root. Boundaries rise within you like gates forged by fire, refusing to let chaos trespass where peace belongs. Energy, once drained by others, now responds like a living compass, guiding you toward alignment and warning you against corruption. Environments feel different. Some nourish, while others tighten around your chest until you can hardly breathe. The body itself responds as though every cell remembers the truth your mind has only begun to name. You are not imagining it. You are awakening to the truth of your design. And then the external begins to mirror the internal, like a stage adjusting to the arrival of its lead. People shift in your presence, either moving closer with awe or retreating with discomfort they cannot explain. Opportunities appear suddenly, almost as if they were waiting behind locked doors until you turn the right key. Resistance intensifies at the same time, proving that light never rises without stirring shadows. Rooms feel different because you have become different, carrying the weight of an atmosphere they can no longer control. What you held inside now bleeds into the world around you, arranging circumstances, exposing illusions, and aligning destiny. You see the hand of God writing across your days, unmistakable and undeniable. And every echo confirms that your presence is no longer neutral. This moment does not arrive as new creation, but as sacred memory returning. It feels like remembering a dream you had long ago, one that lived in your bones even when your mind forgot. The sense of déjà vu that once unsettled you now unfolds as confirmation. You are stepping into what was already written. The silence you carried for years now feels less like absence and more like the echo of ancient vows. Prophetic intelligence awakens, not as something learned, but as something remembered. It is as though your soul has been waiting for the right hour to remind you of what you always were. The memory of your name rises, hidden under layers of noise, shining like a star that never forgot its orbit. And so, destiny stops being an idea and begins to feel like a landscape laid out before you. The future no longer whispers as uncertainty, but as the echo of a path you've already walked in unseen realms. You realize you are not inventing yourself, you are reclaiming yourself. Permission is no longer required, because what heaven ordained cannot be revoked by human mouths. Prophecy does not bend to gossip or envy, and your story was never theirs to rewrite. What calls you forward is not ambition, but remembrance, the fire of recognition burning in your chest. You are not waiting for destiny to arrive. You are rising into what has always been yours. Now, reclamation begins, fierce and undeniable, as though the sword they tried to dull has been placed back in your hand. The resistance you once mistook for rejection is revealed as confirmation, proof of the power you carried all along. Your silence becomes the weapon they cannot resist, cutting through the lies they wrapped around your identity. The voice they tried to silence returns not as noise, but as authority, rising from the very scars they left behind. You are reminded that you were never broken, only hidden, and the truth, once buried, now roars with a strength that will not be denied. What was always yours returns with fire, and you no longer fear claiming it. Revelation is not the end. Chosen one, it is the beginning of invitation. You were never abandoned. You were being prepared to finally see behind the veil. What was hidden is no longer beyond your reach because your spirit has grown strong enough to bear it. The truth is not a burden, it is the crown you were always meant to wear. Every sign, every pattern, every sacred code was waiting for this moment of recognition. Comment, I walk hidden, yet never lost. If you feel the veil lifting in your own life and share the dream, memory, or knowing that is stirred within you. For this awakening is not only your revelation, it is the preparation for what comes next, and what unfolds beyond this point will shake even the ground beneath their illusions. Number 4, the fire that cannot be contained. What begins as a spark, what matures into a sword, and what shifts the atmosphere eventually becomes an unstoppable flame. That flame burns away lies, rewrites your narrative, and forces entire systems to bend under the weight of truth. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 says, "But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." That silence is not emptiness, it is authority. It is the fire of God manifest in the vessel of the chosen. They cannot mock it, they cannot resist it, they cannot control it. Comment, I anchor this truth in my soul, if you feel that flame stirring in you, and share how silence has already become fire in your life. Because once it ignites, it will not stop until everything false has been consumed. And that is only the beginning of what you are becoming. The first sound is not a shout, but a whisper older than the mountains and softer than dawn. It does not come from outside, but rises within as if something long buried has begun to stir. You recognize it not as discovery, but as remembrance, like hearing a melody you once knew before birth. This is not the birth of something new, but the unveiling of what was always hidden, waiting for your ears to grow mature enough to hear. A scroll sealed in silence is being unrolled within your spirit, and every word etched upon it was written in fire before time began. You realize now that your silence was never empty. It was the chamber where divine breath waited, and in that breath, the flame of remembrance begins to burn. There has always been a name hovering just beyond the reach of your tongue, a name no one else could pronounce because it was not given by man. You felt it in the places where you did not belong, when crowds grew loud, yet your spirit stood apart. You carried it like a secret garment under layers of ordinary identity, never knowing why the world's labels fell short. Scripture speaks of the white stone given in Revelation, with a name written on it that no one knows but the one who receives it. And you realize that this was always speaking of you. The sealed scroll of your identity was never meant for the eyes of those who mocked you. It was meant to be uncovered in this hour of awakening, when silence gives birth to fire. And in that unveiling, your hidden name begins to sing inside you. Symbols begin to glow, not on paper, but in the atmosphere around your life. You realize there has always been a cloak upon you, unseen yet undeniable, carried like a garment of light, invisible to those who look only with flesh. The mark you carry is not ink, but resonance, a frequency that only other awakened ones can perceive. Without a word, your presence has testified. Without explanation, your silence has shouted. You feel the recognition in the eyes of strangers who cannot name it, yet cannot ignore it. The cloak is not disguise. It is revelation waiting for the appointed hour. And now that hour has come, and what you carry burns too brightly to be hidden any longer. The truth presses further. You did not stumble here without design, but under the weight of ancient contracts signed before you entered this body. Every struggle was not random, but training. Every delay, not rejection, but timing. Your soul agreed to this before you crossed the threshold of time, and the scars you carry are evidence of vows older than memory. Like stars held in their appointed courses, you were never free to wander far from your orbit. Even exile had its purpose, even silence carried instruction. The sealed missions of your lineage are written in the marrow of your bones. And today, those sealed contracts are being recalled, their fire rekindled, their purpose unchained. You begin to understand why others reacted to you as they did, why your presence seemed to stir storms you never caused. Some loved you fiercely, without reason, while others recoiled as if your very breath threatened their illusions. It was never about what you said or did, but about what you carried. Like a mirror that cannot be broken, you revealed the shadows in others without lifting a hand. To some, this was salvation. To others, unbearable exposure. The love and the rejection were both witnesses of the same fire moving through you. And now you know that every reaction was confirmation of what lay beneath the surface. Chosen one, this is your reminder that silence is not weakness, it is power. Your silence unsettles those who built their lives on lies, because it speaks the language of truth they cannot drown out. Subscribe if you haven't yet, like this video, and comment, "I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul." Please share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the super thanks button to support the mission. Every super thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. Remember this, Chosen One. Your silence is fire, and fire always wins.